Flanagan. The journey of an awakening spirit is about teaching you a variety of tools that you can use to step into your true self. It is about self-discovery, realizing you are not alone on your journey. We will open the phone lines, give readings, and talk about what our listeners want to know. So please welcome the host of The Journey of an Awakening Spirit, Kathleen Flanagan.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Journey of an Awakening Spirit. This is your host, Kathleen Flanagan, and we are streaming on the Bold Brave TV network. And we have a special guest today, and what we're going to do right now is we're going to set the tone for the sound, and then I will introduce him, and we should learn an awful lot about what he has done in his life on his journey of becoming an awakened spirit. So here we go. I have Jim Marshall here with us today, and he is a polymathematical mathematic intellectual who has devoted over 50,000 hours to the study and practice of multiple dimensions of human potential and development. He received a classical education as an honor student at Jesuit Military Prep School, was accepted into engineering school while still a junior in prep school, and attended college on academic scholarship. He graduated college with a Bachelor of Science cum laude. While still on undergraduate, he began the study of alternative arts and sciences, which today would be described as transformational and holistic. Eventually, he became a professional practitioner, and after 28 years of formal education, had a long career as a human development engineer. Jim has integrated the best practices of the most advanced techniques on the planet and expanded their limits by his own research and discovery. He has successfully treated and or trained hundreds of clients over a 40-year career and is the inventor of Septemics and several consciousness expanding systems. His areas of expertise include psychology, philosophy, theology, parapsychology, science, engineering, mathematics, law, literature, history, music, organization, metaphysics, military science, political science, physical culture, and education. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Kathleen. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you, and thank you so much for coming out on the show today. I know it was pretty quick notice, but I studied your website and read what you had on there, and mind-blowing. It's just mind-blowing. There's a lot of information, and what I want to do today is just really talk about how you got into this. What happened? Did Spirit speak to you? What started this whole process on this journey? Because this is such a remarkable journey, and you describe this more as a textbook, which I could see that after reading the one chapter that you had in the book, that this is a study. So I would love to learn how you got into this and then how it developed over the years and what you did as far as being a practitioner of what you created and how your life changed.
Okay, well, the first thing I should tell you is that I have no memory of a time in my life when I was not intensely curious about every possible academic subject. I can clearly remember at the age of 3, I had the same burning inquisitiveness that I have right now. I wanted to know everything. You know, how do the pipes work? How does the TV work? How does the record player work? How does the car work? And so I was driven through my life to study and study and study, and I'm still doing it. I started school when I was 3, and I've been engaged in education my entire life, one way or another. The other thing I should tell you is that I was shocked at the age of 10 to find out that some kids didn't like school. That was such a momentous moment in my life. I can still remember the exact instant standing at the chalkboard in elementary school when I first got that idea. That was hard for me to grasp. I loved school. Now, of course, some of my teachers were jerks, but you're going to run into a few clunkers no matter what you do. But that did not diminish my enthusiasm for learning. When I say learning, I mean learning everything, which is how I wound up becoming a polymathic scholar and eventually a polymathic intellectual. So as far as the book, to sort of connect this, that journey really begins when I was accepted into engineering school at the age of 16. I was accepted into an elite engineering school, which I attended on academic scholarship. And of course, I thought when I started out that I was going to be engineering physical things like airfoils or electrons. But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, it was clear to me that I wanted to engineer the human psyche, because that is the area of greatest difficulty, the area of greatest mystery. It's the area in which we are failing miserably in industrialized society. 95% of the problems that people have in industrialized society are because they don't understand people, don't understand the wife, don't understand the boss, don't understand the son, don't understand the grandmother, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? We're not being eaten by lions anymore or starving to death. The problems we have are because we don't understand people. So this book that I wrote solves that issue. So that's how this connects to my growing up. Now, by the time I had my bachelor's degree and I decided I wanted to engineer the human psyche, I then had a long career as a human development engineer, working one-on-one with hundreds of clients of every description for cumulatively many thousands of hours. And as that was happening, I started to notice incidentally that they would improve in ways that were predictable to me. Now, I never told this to anybody, but I made notes. And as the decades roll by, this happened thousands and thousands of times where I knew the outcome of the session, even though I hadn't said anything to the client. So eventually that led me to discover Septemics.
So excuse me. So when you say that, was it just in how somebody spoke that triggered that you would know where they were in this Septemics?
Well,
I mean something, because you said that you noticed that before the session started, you kind of knew what they were about. So was that just through observation? Was it how they communicated whatever their issues were to you? I mean, what caused that? Because I know that's how you started diving deeper into finding
yes.
this.
So what would happen is I started to notice that the client would be at a specific level on a specific scale that I had previously observed elsewhere.
Okay.
And when the client improved, he would go up to the next level on that scale that I knew already. And every time that happened, it just verified these observations. There's no theory of septemics, it's all empirical. I simply wrote down what I observed. But because I spent a lot of time doing this, and because of my polymathic skills, I was able to see it for what it was. So I was able to discover an entirely new subject that apparently nobody else discovered before. And it has massive implications for people.
So when you discovered this, did you feel like there was an inkling from spirit? Was it something that was mentally aware of? Was it something that came deep inside of your being? Because I mean, this is huge, and you had to crack the code based on our conversation yesterday. There was a code to crack, and what you wrote about on your website is that once you cracked the code, everything fell into place. So I'm just kind of curious as to what was it that triggered that
Okay.
awakening, so to speak.
Well, first of all, I don't think it was an awakening. You have to understand, I have a hard science background. I took 26 semesters of math and loved every minute of it.
Wow, that's a
Now,
lot of math.
now, I actually less now than before, but in general, I think in math. Okay,
But
so
our
I would.
but our world is based on mathematics.
That's right. Math
Yeah,
is, you could say it's the language of God. You can say it's the language of
right.
the universe, whatever you
Yep.
want to call it. But it's so coming from that background and having been a dyed in the wool engineer, aptitude tests confirmed that I was a natural engineer. I mean, the top three things on my results were three types of engineer. So, I already knew when I was 16 that that's who I was. That's what I was about. When I was a kid, I thought I was going to be a physicist. But when I learned about engineering, I realized that I'm an engineer. Engineers and scientists are very different. I don't know if you know that. It's a different personality type.
Oh, I know that.
Yes. So like I had a very close friend I went all the way through prep school with, who eventually became a physicist. We got along well. We were next to one another all the time, taking the same courses. But as people, we were dramatically different. I would think of him as kind of a weirdo. You know, but you have to realize that when I went to engineering school, there were 2,000 engineering students there. We were all very much the same, very practical people. So I used all my engineering skills to help my clients, and I simply observed things and wrote them down. Well, that's what the scientific method is.
Hmm.
You do something and you record it. And then you try to verify it. And to the degree that it's verified, it eventually becomes a hypothesis. And then if it continues to be verified, it becomes a theory. Well, that is the goal of every scientist, to create a theory, like the theory of evolution or the theory of relativity. It's all about theories. That's a big word in science. So I was sort of inured into that. So I just followed that, my natural inquisitiveness, my burning desire to help my clients. And just I brought all of my knowledge to bear, all of these subjects that you referred to earlier. And I was just able to see these patterns. I mean, I was really, in a sense, just like a guy who's walking down the street and finds a $100 bill and picks it up and puts it in his pocket. That's how I found this. Now, there was a point at which it went from being simply data that I was recording, which nobody knew about but myself, to being what I labeled septemics. And I'll tell you how that happened. I had, by 1995, I had a collection of scales of varying lengths that I knew were correct from direct observation over many decades. One of these was a 6-level scale that I had been using on a daily basis for, I don't know, maybe 40 years at that point. So while pondering a particularly difficult client one day, the light bulb went on over my head. I said, wait a minute, this scale has a 7th level. And this client manifested it perfectly. So when I knew, it was obvious to me where to insert it. So I inserted that level into the 6-level scale. And when I did that, it manifested mathematically.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors, and I want to hear the rest of this story when we come back.
Okay.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Kathleen Flanagan, your host on the Journey of an Awakening Spirit, and we are talking to Jim Marshall, and he just made a big discovery, and we're going to find out how everything started to fall into place for him from this discovery.
Okay, so as I said, I had a 6-level scale, and I had a realization one day that it had a 7th level. And I could tell you later, if you're interested, why I didn't find that level earlier. There's a very specific reason. But anyway, I inserted this, and it became a 7-level scale. And when it did, it manifested mathematically. All of these data jumped out at me. Now, if you know anything about math, the whole point of math is that you start with an equation or a formula, and you coax data out of it. That's how Einstein got E equals mc squared. Anybody who knows advanced math and physics can follow those calculations. It's very specific. Now, when I saw that, I said, whoa, I don't know what this is, but whatever it is, it's natural law because it has mathematics embedded in it, like the Fibonacci sequence. So then, again, in keeping with my engineering mind, I said, I wonder how many of these other scales that I have are actually 7-level scales that haven't been developed all the way because I wasn't developing anything. I was just helping my clients in making notes. So I then observed all of these scales, I inspected them, and because I knew what I was looking for, in a short period of time, each one went to 7 levels. And when they did, each one manifested mathematically. It went click. So it went from being a scale to a plane. In other words, it was a whole body of data. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. Sometimes people say, well, what book is your book like? And having gone to school for 28 years, I have to say in all candor, I don't think there's ever been a book like this before. But each of these 35 septemic scales is expressed in what you might call a table or a spreadsheet. And each of those tables is comparable to or similar to the periodic table of elements, but for the corresponding subject. Each of the scales covers a subject. And of course, if I told you the names of the subjects, then you would see the scope of it. So it's like a periodic table. It's like 35 periodic tables. But instead of being for physical science, it's for these human phenomena. So then I said, wait a minute. I found a new subject here. I tried for years to fit this into some pre-existing context. Cannot be done. It is a separate subject. Now, all of my polymathic background sort of figured into how I discovered this, but this is a new and separate subject. So then I said, wait a minute. I can go from helping people by the hundreds, which is what I had been doing as a human development engineer, to helping people by the millions if I put this in a book and get it out to the public and let everybody see this and use it. Because this is really useful data. And it's not hard to understand because it's natural law. Like, for example, most people in industrialized society know about the Pythagorean theorem, okay? Once you see it, you get it. It's not hard to get. You don't forget it easily. It's so obvious once you know what it is. It's with you for life, okay? And it always works. And that is what this material is like. I absolutely know that these scales are correct. And the reason I know is I worked on this book for 25 years.
So as you were working on the book for this, how did your life change? I mean, were you practicing these principles with yourself? Were you watching your own evolution through this besides just your clients? Because, I mean, for this to be this passionate, and yes, it's a lot of mathematics, but there's still an evolution in you that was transpiring. So were you like creating like how to do this for people to do this on their own as well? Like not necessarily a how-to, but something that kind of helps people to find where they fit inside those different categories of the 35 I can't remember what you called it now.
Scale.
How were you practicing this for you in your own life?
Okay. Well, first of all, I have to tell you, long before I got the idea of putting this in a book, I was finding this data, as I said, because I was like 20 when I started working with people. Okay.
Okay.
And just because I'm an observant person, I started seeing pretty early on that I could predict the outcome of the session. I would say, okay, this guy's at this level on this scale, and as a result of that, he's going to go up to the next level, which is this thing, and that's what would happen.
And what about you? I mean, did you see your own evolution as well?
Well, so let me say this. First of all, I have been meditating my entire adult life, okay, on a daily basis. And over the course of all those decades, it averages out to about an hour a day, which is a lot of meditation. So I was continually expanding my own consciousness, my own mind, my ability to perceive keeps getting better and sharper and clearer. My mind is clearer now than it was when I spoke to you yesterday because I meditated today.
No, I believe that because meditation was one of the things that got me started in this as far as coming up with my own identity and understanding the mistruths that were told to me when I was a young child. So I fully comprehend what you're saying and the clarity that is there. So when you had a crossroad in your life, then did you apply those principles, or was it just the clarity of the meditation that helped you ease through crossroads? Because we all have crossroads in our lives.
Well, both are true. I mean, the meditation gradually puts you into what I would say relative to septemics, an upscale position. There are scales, so you can be high on the scale and low on the scale. And so without knowing these scales existed, I was pushing myself up these scales.
Yeah.
You see? So, and you have to realize the common denominator of all the scales is insight. When a person is at or near the top of any scale, it's because he's insightful in that area. And when a person is at or near the bottom of any scale, it's because he lacks insight in that area. Now, there are some people who are generally downscale people, and there are some people who are generally upscale people. But most of us are A, more or less in the middle, and B, high on some and low on others. But of course, I told you about my epiphany in 1995 about that I had discovered this material and I had just been seeing it. And because it was real to me, I used it continuously. I mean, using septemics for me is as difficult as drinking water. It's like, I know the data, it's there. People tell you their levels. If you just watch somebody, watch what he does and watch what he says, he will tell you his level on any scale. That's how you find the level. You observe the person. And the beauty of it is, in any one of the 35 scales, you're only choosing from amongst 7 levels. For example, if I stop some guy in the street and say, "What's your wife's motivation toward you?" He can say, "Well, how the hell can I know that?" But you see, there are only 7 levels of motivation, and all the other ones are subsets of these. So when you only have to choose from amongst 7, it's not that hard. If I show him the scale, right away he'll throw out 3 or 4 of them. Say, "Well, it's not that, it's not that." And then I'll say, "Well, go ahead, read the chapter, and then you can get," and he will get it. He'll say, "Oh, now I see. Her motivation toward me is this." And when he does that, he will have an epiphany. He'll say, "Oh, that explains why X, Y, and Z."
So when I get what you're saying, and it almost makes you feel a little scared that, oh God, what am I saying? That he's like making not a judgment, but awareness. But I think the main thing is, how did this help you? I mean, have you had like minimal conflict in your life because of this? Because you were able to ascertain people, and then you knew how to work around their issues to where it's more of an empowering relationship than a dysfunctional type relationship?
Absolutely. When I was a young man, this material didn't exist. I hadn't discovered it yet. So I made the same stupid mistakes that everybody else makes. Got involved with people I shouldn't have been involved with, et cetera, et cetera. But as the years went by, that happened less and less. And now that does not happen, cannot happen, will not happen, because I see what's happening. It's like if I go into your garden, right? Let's say you have a garden. I can say, "Oh, she's got tulips, she's got hydrangeas, she's got roses, she's got violets," right? Because I know flowers. Now, some little kid doesn't know anything about flowers. He just goes in and sees these pretty things growing. See, he can't analyze it because he doesn't have any data. So I have all this data, and it's not about judgment. It's about understanding. It's about seeing what's there.
And that'll elevate you to that higher level on the scales, correct?
Well, the higher you are on the scale, the more insightful you are. And the more you use the scales, the more insightful you become. So it is a snowball effect, where the more you use this material, the more insightful you continually get more insightful.
Now, do you have children?
Yes.
And how did this work with your children? I'm just curious of how, because I'm sure you must have been an amazing father with that kind of an insight to help them develop a better self-esteem. So how did you work with your children on something like that?
Well, first of all, I should tell you my son is 31.
Okay.
So that predates my epiphany about septemics. So I
Oh,
bits and pieces of this data, chunks of it, that I knew was right, but I didn't have the concept of septemics as a subject. And
okay.
basically, as he was growing up, I was writing the book. And let me tell you about writing the book, because that's interesting in and of itself. First, I had to glean the data. I had to discover the phenomena, which mostly happened in my sessions. I would just see the client go to a certain level, and I would make a note of that, you see? And then I have another client who would do exactly the same thing. And I never told my clients anything, even if they asked me, do you think I should date this girl? Wouldn't answer the question. What do you think? See, that was the skill that I had. I used Socratic dialogue, aided by biofeedback, to get the person to a higher level where he would have an epiphany. Every single step with every client always ended in a realization. That's how I knew we were done. He'd be saying, yeah, I can't get along with my brother, problem. And then we'll say, wait a minute, I just realized he's just like my father. No wonder, See, and then I knew we're done with that one. See,
Okay.
he had this epiphany, and we go on to something else. So let me finish telling you about writing the book, because that was
Okay.
interesting.
Can we do that after we come back from taking a break with hear a word from our sponsors?
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
It was almost instant, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Kathleen Flanagan, your host with The Journey of an Awakening Spirit, and we are talking to Jim Marshall, and he was just getting ready to tell us about his experience of writing his book.
Okay. So, as I said, first I had to discover the phenomena, these phenomena that apparently nobody had observed before. Most of that was done by 1995, although I did find 3 more scales as I was writing the book. Then I had to use this data to craft a workable philosophic system. That took 20 years. Because you have to realize there are 35 scales, each of which has 7 levels. That's 245 different levels, each of which had to be verified and perfected. And the whole thing had to be constructed in a way that would work and would make sense. Because as an engineer, I'm only interested in results and facts. Opinions and beliefs are irrelevant to engineering. So then the most time-consuming aspect of this was expressing this in a way that would make sense to the average reader of English. And I know I succeeded at that because I've been seeing the results of this for 27 and a half years. Because the original text was completed in December of 95. I sent it out to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees in a variety of subjects, and they all had different responses, but the responses were distinctly positive. And that told me this is exactly what I think it is, a new subject that could really help people. And that's what motivated me to spend the next 25 years working on this.
Now, do you train people with this, or do they need a coach? Is this something they can do on their own?
Well, I very premeditatedly wrote the book in such a way that once you have the book, you don't need anything else.
Okay.
That was in the back of my mind all the time, that once you have this book, you don't need to take a class, you don't need to hire a facilitator, you don't need to join a religion, you don't need to spend money. It's just you and the book. Now, the only thing you might want to have is a dictionary, but I would say that for every book in the world. Having been involved in education my whole life, I would never teach anything to anybody without having a dictionary handy. Because most people don't realize that they don't know the correct meaning of most words. So I never say to my clients, do you know what this word means? Because 99% of the time they'll say yes. I say, do you know what the word antediluvian means? And if I don't get a correct answer in 1 second, I say, okay, let's look it up. And 100% of the time they say, oh, I see, yeah. Because, most words have multiple definitions. And that is actually a problem because people have the correct definition, but not for this application. So they don't really get it correctly. And that was sort of one of my secrets as far as becoming a polymath. The thing that I knew best by the time I had my bachelor's degree was how to study, or you might say, how to learn. And so I just continued to do that. And I'm still doing it.
Can you tell me what a polymath actually means? Because I really don't know what that term means in relation to you and how you identify yourself as that.
Okay, well, first of all, I should tell you, I did not think of myself as a polymath until a few years ago.
Okay.
I was just a guy who knew a lot, and people would talk to me and say, boy, you know a lot of stuff, don't you? And I just thought of myself as a guy who's well-read and liked to learn. But a polymath is somebody who is learned in multiple disparate subjects.
Mm.
So I used to think of myself as a polymathic scholar. But then after a while I said, well, really, it makes more sense. It's more truthful for me to say now I'm a polymathic intellectual. Because I knew I was an intellectual and I knew I was a polymath, but somehow I didn't put those two together until a few years ago. That's what I am, and it sort of defines my personality because my perception of the world is distinctly different from everybody else I know. Because when you learn a subject, whether it's physics or psychology or economics or military science, when you learn it, it affects you. It changes your perception. You see things differently because you know this information. So I have an unusual perspective of the world. And I think that's why I was able to see Septemics when it appeared before me, and why I was able to convey it in a way that makes sense to the average reader.
Now, you feel that this was a gift and this was your purpose in life was to bring this forward, correct? Or are you too scientifically minded to think like that? Because to me, what you brought is a huge gift to this planet that I don't think anyone else can bring because of just your knowledge and all the studying you did and that drive that you had to learn. That you could see it. I mean, just to see that, because this is massive what you've done.
Right.
Because when I read that one chapter on the website that you put up there, and I'm going, wow, I get why he's saying that we have to study this, because where I could see where I think I was, and then what the number 7 is not necessarily a positive thing, but yet it's a positive thing, but there's also a dark side to it as well, like how you described the various leaders and people that were significant in our last life, this particular lifetime, over the last 6,000 years, and the surprises that you felt with Caesar and Napoleon Bonaparte. And I'm like, I don't know what he's saying there. I can't quite pinpoint it, but I was just like really trying to understand that. And is there a logical way when you go through this book for you to understand all the scales that you talk about? Because just that one chapter I read it and it made sense, but then I got, well, I think I'm a little confused at the same time, because I know I didn't have the glossary or anything or the first chapter or anything like that. I understand that. So does it compound itself in the book to bring that kind of clarity, or can you go ahead and explain that a little bit more so it makes sense? Because it's fascinating. This is fascinating to me.
Well,
Is a power tool.
first of all, there is a glossary, not only in front of every chapter, even in front of the introduction, there's a glossary. So
Okay.
I'm telling you with specificity the definition of the words I'm using. The names of the 35 scales are defined. The names of the 7 levels of every scale are defined. There's no ambiguity. So, for example, there's a scale of communication. Well, somebody could say, well, if you look up the word communication, it has like 30 definitions. Which one is he using? So I tell you, I give you one specific definition, the one that fits best. And then you know, okay, that's what it is. So this is all part of kind of a scientific way of approaching things, because in the world of STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, everything has to be defined, and it is. There's no ambiguity. You're not allowed to be ambiguous. So the type of person who would gravitate toward that is a person who has an unambiguous mind. I want to know, what is the definition? I think it was it Descartes who said, if you would argue with me, define your terms.
Mm.
So I would say there's probably some spiritual destiny or something beyond my knowledge that resulted in my creating this system, which is for the benefit of mankind. Although, I wasn't aware as I was plodding toward it that that's what it was going to be. Because until it blossomed in front of me, I didn't know what I had.
Do you see yourself trying to get this advocated into the educational system somehow? Because I mean, the one thing is we don't really talk about how to treat each other, how to get along with people. We just let the kids do whatever they're doing. And to me, this could be such a very powerful, empowering tool, because everything you talk about is you're constantly empowering your clients. And I think this could be something amazing to get into, even if it's just a private school, just to get it out there. Are you advocating for anything like that?
No, and I'll tell you why. First of all, as I state in the book, all of the institutions of mankind are corrupt and dysfunctional. The schools are dysfunctional, the banks are dysfunctional, the healthcare system is dysfunctional, the governments are dysfunctional. There's nothing on an institutional level that's not dysfunctional. Okay? The education system has been devolving my entire life. Okay? The results are worse and worse and worse. You don't even have people who can read. So giving this book to somebody who can't read is a complete waste of time. So that's not something I'm contemplating. Now, This is something I already know from direct observation. Anybody who gets this, meaning they read this, they understand it, they play it, they duplicate it in their minds, is going to have an impact on society, whether they realize it, whether they intend it or not, because you necessarily are going to use this. So, for example, there's a scale of scholarship. Most people have children, and most children have trouble in school. So the dad sees that Junior's having trouble. He says, Junior, come here, let me show you something. And he shows him the scale of scholarship. Well, the kid's a scholar, so he's going to be interested. He says, you mean there's a scale of scholarship? And the dad says, yeah, where are you on this scale, you see? And he'll find his level. And then when he finds his level, the dad can move him up to the next level up, because I have solved the gradient problem that has bedeviled mankind for 6,000 years. Each of these scales is the gradients. You go from 7 to 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 on across all of them.
Okay. Well, we're winding down. So how can people get a hold of you, Jim?
Well, I invite your viewers to go to my website, which is septemics.com, Septemics, where you can see what many readers have said, what many journalists have written, what the reviews are. You can read sections of the book itself, and you can listen to a pre-recorded introduction to Septemics. And if you do all that, you're probably going to want to buy the book.
Well, I know that I'm very interested in the book of what you've written. It just seems very empowering, and there's a lot to learn. And when you say that this is a study course, it really is going to be a study, because it's easy read, but it's also a challenge. And that's just because we're looking inward and grasping things in a different way than we're used to doing it. So I'm very excited about that you came on the show, that you reached out to come on the show. I really do appreciate that. And I just want to let everyone know that this show is going to be up, and if you want to subscribe to my YouTube channel, it's at Kathleen M. Flanagan, and my website is Kathleen M. Flanagan as well. So, and I do also have my books, Dancing Souls, that are out there on Amazon. That it's the journey of an awakening spirit. It's more on the spiritual side. You're more scientific, and you know what? We all get there however we need to get there. So I want to just say thank you, everyone, and thank you again, Jim, for being here. And I hope all of you have a fabulous week.
Thank you, Kathleen.
This has been the journey of an awakening spirit with your host, Kathleen Flanagan. Join Kathleen each week as she will inspire and empower all those who are drawn to her to live their highest vision in the context of love and joy. Right here Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.